This here is the second Ford Cabover that I've rescued from rotting away in a field, and I'm thinking that this cab is going to be the perfect contender to use for my heavy haul toter home project. This truck has a 14-liter big cam Cummins, but it's been sitting for at least the last 10 years. Allegedly, it ran when parked, which is always good news. So, will we be able to resurrect it from its slumber? We're going to figure that out together. Let's see if we can get this little fuel filter out of here. Yeah, it's rotating for us. Well, I got a new filter in there. Here's the turbo, and the turbine wheel in there is seized against the rust that's built up in this housing. So I'm gonna get a socket on the nut on the compressor side and try to rock this back and forth and free this up. Hey, there we go. That was ready to free right up. It's good to see. Put some fresh fuel in. I got a few batteries hooked up, and I'm going to try turning over the engine without the fuel solenoid hooked up. So this will keep fuel from flowing to the injector, so this engine doesn't actually try to fire off. But if we can get a few rotations out of this engine, we'll start building oil pressure. We can send oil everywhere before we start firing on actual fuel. So I am going to just jump start this starting solenoid here. Let's see if this works. Let's go another round. And then over here, I did unhook the turbo feed line. And it looks like we are flowing some oil out of that now. That bottle's starting to fill up with oil. So, oil's starting to move through the engine. Now, I'll go ahead and hook this turbo line back up so we can get some oil to the turbo and then crank a little bit more and continue sending oil elsewhere in the engine. Just because the turbo is, I think, one of the first things to get oil here. So just because we're getting oil here doesn't mean every other spot in the rest of the engine has oil yet. Got 4 batteries in here now, and I think we're ready to start cranking on this thing. I'll hook up the fuel shutoff solenoid so they can start flowing fuel, and we'll crank on it and see if we have any signs of fuel priming through the system. It looked like there's a little bit of haze coming out the tailpipe, so might be trying to get some fuel going. I'll give it a little squirt of starting fluid, see if that helps encourage it. I'm able to work the throttle over here as well, so we'll just keep trying. Come on. Let me just try to keep it alive with some starting fluid. I'm thinking the last thing this engine needs to run is some AG1. AG1 is the sponsor of today's video, and it's done so much good for my health that maybe it'll be healthy for this engine too. I'm also ready to take my AG1 for the day, and I love mixing it with some orange juice because for some reason that just takes the taste of AG1 from good to great in my opinion. I learned the orange juice technique from the Peck brothers, and man, you guys gotta try it out this way if you happen to get some AG1. This has really turned into a nice little treat I look forward to each day. Now I'll add a scoop of the good stuff, and obviously I'm mixing it up the best way I know how, by strapping it to the very sloppy bucket of my giant excavator I just got. This will be noisy, but effective. Perfectly mixed every time. Now, why I like to include AG1 in my diet is because it is a comprehensive nutrition supplement with 75 vitamins, minerals, and whole food source ingredients that support my body, brain, and gut health. Which means having a scoop of AG1 takes the pressure off of finding all these nutrients throughout the foods that I eat and fills nutrient gaps that I'd be missing out on anyways. I also noticed that I am less dependent on caffeine when I'm taking AG1, and I'm not alone in that experience. AG1 conducted research studies with independent scientists, and they found that 97% of participants felt more energy after 30 days of taking AG1. So use the link in my description below or scan the QR code to subscribe and save $20 off your first subscription of AG1. That way, if you'd like to support my channel and save a bunch of money on a killer product, then check out AG1 through my link below. And thank you, AG1, for sponsoring today's video. You might just be working out the remaining little bit of air in the fuel system. Perfect. I have the fuel returning just here for now. So now that it seems like we're getting good return, I'll go ahead and hook the returns back to the tank so we can actually recirculate the fuel as it's supposed to. Now let's see if this thing will fire right back up on its own. Definitely idles quite high, so I'll see if I can dial that back down. But I did check the oil pressure gauge in the cab, and we were getting like 80 psi of oil pressure, so real good oil pressure. This thing's idling at like 1300 RPM, and I don't know why. The throttle shaft returns all the way, and to adjust the idle RPM on these big cam Cummins, you have to pull this plug out and adjust the screw that's in there. But when you do all that, you drain a bunch of fuel out, and then you got to bleed the air out of the fuel system again, and you put it back all together, and you still don't really know where your idle's going to set up at. So I'm not sure if I'm going to really bother adjusting the idle anytime soon. I was just messing with trying to figure out the wiring with the Jake brakes because they didn't seem to be working. So I hot wired them, and I think I just saw flames out the exhaust. So I'm going to try to replicate that. I don't know if that's healthy at all for the engine, but it's pretty fun. Oh, actually, that does make sense because we're at such a high idle that this engine's still trying to squirt a lot of fuel in the cylinders. But the Jake brake is blipping open the exhaust valves on the compression stroke, so that unburnt fuel is passing through into the tailpipe, which should then kind of combust in there. There's an old local guy around here that does a lot with semi-trucks, and I bought some tires from him back in the day. And when I was there, I noticed he had a Ford Cabover cab sitting in his back lot. The rear axles were chopped off of it, but the cab is still there and the front axle, but no engine or transmission. But being that these trucks are so rare to come across, I went ahead and went back to his place and struck a deal to buy this parts cab from him. So I was trying to get my original Ford Cabover running, but its batteries are shot and it's just draining them down and it will not start. So I'm getting impatient. I'm going to grab the excavator and see if we can use that to bump start it with an idea that I have. And then if we can get it running, I'll hook up to my buddy's gooseneck, since this guy lives back in the woods and it'll be easier with a smaller trailer to maneuver these back roads. But let's see if the excavator feels like doing an effective job of starting this truck. Now I did add this custom gooseneck plate to my semi a while ago, so if you'd like to see how I made that, I'll include some footage of that later on in this video. strapped down. Let's head back home. This Cabover has a lot of mouse turd action going on with the interior. So I'm going to work on gutting it, just stripping out all the carpet and any sort of soft material that could really absorb that odor. And I'm going to go full hazmat mode for that. Ain't going to get no hantavirus today. Oh. Yeah. Yeah. These things ruined this truck. Well, the more I dug into the interior of this truck, the more I hated the idea of keeping anything in it original, just because the mice had just gotten everywhere in it. And also the plastic was old and sun faded and dried out and brittle. And I also don't want to rely on 45-year-old electrical wires and air plumbing through this cab, so I'm going to freshen it all up, replace everything, completely redo the inside of this cab, lay it out a little bit different than factory, more customized to my liking. It'll turn out nice. But as you can see now, we're down to just a bare, stripped aluminum cab. So this will be perfect for the rest of the project because it's still a nice solid aluminum cab, which obviously hasn't corroded at all. So I'm happy with the platform we're working with here. Now I'm going to jack up the cab and remove more of the HVAC system that's underneath the cab, because there's still a lot of mouse action down there. And also because I have no intentions of reusing the factory air conditioning and heating systems on this, because I want to convert to an electrical air conditioning system on this truck anyways, and then we'll just have a big alternator on the engine to run that, and that way we can also run that system without the engine running off of an APU or battery pack or whatever. Just try to cut through this mounting bracket that's holding us up. Yeah, there we go. Loaded up all this interior junk on my military truck, so it's ready to go to the dump. Even all these trash bags are full of stuff from the inside of that truck, and I'm just ready to get it out of here. It was nasty. Now, I tore down this truck a bit too much to actually be able to take it for a test drive, and it had a bunch of air leaks too that I didn't feel like tracking down, and being that I'm going to be tearing this thing all apart for the heavy haul toter home, I didn't really care to get it running in its current state. But what I did do is I plumbed some air just directly to the transmission. And that allows us to have our high-low. And here's our splitter. So now that I have air going to the transmission, that should mean we should be able to work through all the gears and see if this transmission feels pretty good. So I have the back axles hoisted up in the air with the excavator. I'm curious to see how hard it'll be with just tires spinning in the air to be able to float the gears, but we'll give it a try. shift through all 13 gears of this truck really smoothly, so it's good to know that we have a good transmission, a good engine, and a good cab out of this truck. But this truck has a lot more of a story behind it than just what you've seen today. I originally came across this truck when I was driving through the Utah-Idaho border, and I noticed it parked in the field off the side of the road. And obviously I wanted it, so I tracked down the owner and bought it. But it was a pain to get it out of that field because it was parked for over 10 years, so it sunk down into the dirt, and obviously it didn't run. So I used my military truck to winch it up onto the trailer. So let's go back in time and I'll show you that old footage from that day. You guys, I was lucky enough to find another Ford Cabover abandoned in a field, and it's coming home with me. Now I really only care about these old Ford Cabovers when they're the style that has the air ride cab, which this one does. It has airbags on all four corners of the cabs. The whole cab bounces like a cloud and rides really smooth. Because American Cabovers have kind of gathered a reputation of being really rough riders and just backbreakers with how rough they ride. But that's not the case with these old Fords. They ride like a cloud. As you can tell by this tree growing through this truck, this one's been sitting for a long time. Apparently it's been sitting for like 10 to 15 years. So the goal for this truck is we're not even gonna try to get it started here in the field. We're just gonna load it up on a trailer, get it back to the shop, put oil pressure to it, get everything lubed up inside the engine before we start trying to crank on it. So we'll definitely go grab my Ford Cabover to tow this thing with. And instead of trying to borrow a trailer for my semi, I do have a heavy duty gooseneck that I know I can borrow right now. So I just need to put a gooseneck hitch on my semi, and then I'll just use that trailer. So let's head back home and get a gooseneck hitch on my semi so we can hook up to that one trailer. And then I'm also gonna have my buddy drive my Army truck up here, and we're gonna use the big winch that's on one of my Army trucks to just drag this semi up onto the trailer. Okay, I have my semi back into the shop. We'll work on putting this gooseneck hitch on it. This is just a random homemade gooseneck plate that I got for free, which some of these welds are pretty bad. So particularly this weld holding on this ball, I'm gonna grind out and put a nice good weld in there. But as far as mounting it to the truck, I want it down low on this lower frame rail, because then that's more of the height of pickup trucks, so that's what goosenecks will be used to. And if it was up on this upper deck, then it would interfere with my normal hitch here. So I kind of want this to just be a gooseneck ball that hides down in here, that never gets in the way, but it is always there if I ever want to hook a gooseneck to this more in the future. So to do that, I'm going to cut this in half, cut it down like right there, and I may even add some vertical gussets as well. And that should be plenty strong for what we need. This is 3/8 thick plate. Okay, I have the old weld ground out, so now I'm gonna put an actual strong weld in there. And then to further beef up this plate, I'm gonna put this cross beam along there. But I have to have it facing up because our drive lines and axle is right underneath here, and I don't wanna encroach on it too much. And I wanna make sure that axle can have all its up travel without colliding into anything here. I do also have some holes gnawed through this plate for some bolts. But then another thing we have to tackle is this gap right here. This whole plate has already been bowed a little bit from previous ton weight. So I'm going to weld these ends and then put this piece in the press and hopefully close up that gap and then weld it. All right, here's the hitch. I gnawed out these big holes for the gooseneck chains to hook to. And then we have these 4 holes in the corners. And it's going to bolt to my frame rails with these 5/8 diameter grade 8 bolts. And I already have the holes drilled in my frame rail. So let's sit it down in there. Nice. Okay, let's slap the bolts in. Okay, it's tucked in there. Should be solid. Guys, I need to introduce you to somebody very special. This is Nick. He's the brave soul that's about to drive the Army truck in 25-degree weather at 65 miles an hour with no windshield or roof or cab or anything. So we're going to bundle him up in some layers. That's a lot of layers. Hope you survive.
Hey, I think I'll be good.
Did you survive?
Yeah, it's not too bad.
Awesome.
It's pretty cozy. That's the best posture I've ever had driving though. Just forcing me back.
Nice. What was your coldest part of your body?
Coldest part, my eyes. These goggles breathe way too much.
Dang.
Yeah. Other than that, I was pretty warm.
Nice. I think our ramps will be wide enough. Nick, you want to go grab the army truck?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now this truck is sunk into the ground quite a bit, and we're not even going to bother caging the brakes or anything. We're going to try to see if we can just drag it with brute force onto the trailer. So let's see if that army truck winch has it in it. You ready, Nick? Does it smell like mouse turds in there?
Yeah, it feels super clean.
Yeah, it needs a little detail, but still has potential for sure. The whole army truck's moving. Winch won't go anymore. All right, this truck is proving to be more of a dead weight than we were expecting.
Yeah, she's pretty sunk in this side over here.
Yeah, I think this one steer tire is putting up the most fight. You can see it's sunk down in the mud, just down to the rim. So there's even a little mound of dirt in front of here. So I think the new game plan is we'll bring the military truck back into this slot, hook to this corner of the truck, and pull with like an upward angle and try to get this corner out of this hole. And once that tire's out of that hole, the military truck might be strong enough to get it the rest of the way up the trailer.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. It's working. Go that way. Pulling my whole truck forward again. But look what we have right here. A giant steel pipe buried deep in the ground. I think we're going to take this ratchet strap, lasso this a bit, and then anchor it to the trailer to hold the trailer back while we pull the truck forward. Maybe that'll work.